Welcome back to the FIT40 Podcast, where we simplify exercise and nutrition for busy parents 40 plus so they can improve their health and feel amazing. I'm your host, Brian Fitzsimmons, certified personal trainer and nutrition coach for people over 40 since 2015. And today we have an awesome guest with us. We have Sean Hyson in the house. He helps regular people gain muscle and lose fat with no wasted time or effort. He's a certified strength and conditioning specialist, the CSCS, if you guys have heard me talk about that. We share that in common, as well as the PPSC, which is the pain-free performance specialist. He's been featured in Hers Magazine, MTV, My Fox New York, VH1. He's an author of 101 Best Workouts of All Time, the Men's Health Encyclopedia of Muscle, and he's the former training director for Men's Fitness and Muscle and Fitness magazines and editor-in-chief of On It, a content consultant for Noble as well. So if you guys are familiar with that, if you've worn the Noble stuff, this guy is connected to him and he is awesome. He's a wealth of information. I cannot wait to pick his brain. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brian. Man, that was fast.
I like to get it out of the way early, but I mean, you got a laundry list of cool stuff I had to mention, so had to throw it in there.
Yeah, you fit all that in perfectly.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Sean, I'd love to kind of just go down the rabbit hole with you on all things training, because clearly, like, I know we briefly talked about it before we hit the record button about like you've talked with people like famous bodybuilders and things like that. So I'm curious, like, what, I guess to start off with like a banger, what is something consistent that you see with these high level performers, like these high level athletes and regular everyday people that you think most people wouldn't really think that they have in common?
Yeah, it's funny. I just got asked this the other day, and I think that what you notice with a lot of these high-level guys, the celebrities, or the elite athletes, they don't think about it too much. They don't overthink anything. They just get in the habit of being consistent with a healthy habit, and they keep it going. And that's the most important thing, I think, for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I've mentioned this in a couple of podcasts before. I'm like, I'm still kind of workshopping the idea of the whole discipline thing, because it seems like the people that are at the top of their game, they're not like super in their head saying, I'm super disciplined. It's like they have a very immediate understanding of what the reward is. So, like, for somebody who isn't quite there, like, what would you say would help to get to that place of saying, okay, I could treat this as not a big deal because I know I'm going to get this in return?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I don't believe in discipline personally. I'm a pretty disciplined guy, but I don't believe in discipline. I believe in desire. I think if it's important to you, you get it done. If you find some enjoyment in it, you'll get it done. So it's not, if you start thinking in terms of discipline and grinding it out, that's how it's going to feel. It's like you're grinding it out. So yeah, I mean everything in fitness comes back to little healthy habits and small decisions. Can you do one thing better today than yesterday? Can you start drinking water before meals so you get a little bit more full when you sit down to eat? So you're not gonna pig out. You won't be as likely to pig out. Can you go to the gym 4 days instead of three, or 3 days instead of two? Even if you don't work out when you get there, can you just get in the habit of driving to the gym and maybe walking in and changing into your gym clothes and walking around a little bit and, lifting a couple of weights and just seeing how that feels, getting more comfortable with the atmosphere. These little things that seem so insignificant under a microscope, in one day, over time, they really they manifest.
So what you're saying is I don't need the super complex program or macro requirements. I don't buy it. It's not sexy enough.
Yeah, I mean, even the guys who are doing the super complex stuff, they generally didn't start that way, and all that complexity, when you boil it down, it's just it's just an accumulation of a lot of little simple things.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't realize that those that are doing those super complex things, they only really have to worry about that one thing that's the newest that they've added in. The other stuff they do mindlessly. The other stuff's just ingrained at that point. So it's not this giant grind, even though they try and portray it that way. Now, and another thing I wanted to get into too is how you brought up the whole desire concept, because at the end of the day, we're either running away from pain or running towards pleasure or desire. Like, what have you noticed, at least in your own training or other people as well, when they find these things that are like, okay, I'm chasing that? Like, what are some common things that they find real enjoyment out of?
Enjoyment as far as the routines of fitness.
Yeah, it could be the routines, or even I know we touched on the results and everything, but it's like, are there specific things that you notice in those that are super duper consistent where they're like, they kind of are going towards this specific goal or this result or this pleasure?
I think for regular people, anytime you can integrate a social aspect into fitness, you seem to see a big uptick in adherence and enjoyment in general. So, whether you have a gym buddy or if it's just a friend that you can take a walk around the block with at a given time every day or every couple days, that's really important. I mean, that's really the driving force behind the success of CrossFit and all these different franchise gym classes we have nowadays. Is they took something that was once weightlifting, this kind of a pursuit of very isolated people on the fringes of society, and they made it very mainstream. They made it acceptable and a fun social gathering thing. So I mean, that's so important is if you have somebody to share it with.
Yeah. It's very much a community in that regard where it's like, we know we're weird. We know most people don't do what we do, but we're all in this together. And I think as fitness people too, it's becoming much more mainstream to be in this fit category. Now, I know that we've seen everything as far as different intensity levels with people taking it to the max and people just kind of doing it casually. Like, I think that's kind of where CrossFit might have tailed off a little bit. They turned into the competition a little bit too much. Now, when it comes to keeping it accessible, keeping it fun and open for people, like what's a good starting point that you think most people should begin with if they aren't doing like anything right now?
I mean, just start with something fun. Start with something you enjoy. Forget about what's optimal and what the science or the latest influencer or whatever the news flash on TV was the night says is the best thing. People have gotten in shape with you and I as trainers. We've seen this all the time. People have gotten in shape with horrendous workouts, things you and I would never recommend, things that are very suboptimal, borderline dangerous. But when people were consistent with them because they enjoyed them, they saw some results. And then hopefully that eventually leads to you doing something a little smarter and a little bit more planned out down the road. But the first thing is just to get started. If you love people love boxing classes, martial arts because it's empowering and makes them feel tough and they burn calories and it's social. People love, walking groups because again, it's social. People love signing up for like a triathlon or a marathon or something, because even though it's rigorous and very intense right out of the gate, it's a big challenge and it can, put you in touch with other people who are like-minded and, it gives you something to work towards. So whatever you find is going to light a fire under you is the right answer.
Yeah. And I love that because it actually made me remember the very first place I trained at. There was a guy who was the most popular trainer in the gym, and he would always have his clients doing some boxing for conditioning. And I'm like, this is so stupid. Like, he's not going to gain any muscle doing that. He's not going to. And I'm just like, that guy's a genius because people really just want a reason to like let it loose. And I do it a lot with medicine balls, but like it helps so much in so many different areas. And marathon training gets a bad rap too, because people are like, oh, it's going to hurt you and all this stuff. But it's like, well, what's the alternative? Kind of like medicine. It's like, yeah, if you take too much of it, no good. But if you get just the right amount, it's pretty solid, like overall.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I noticed something when I was doing a little bit of a deep dive on your website and everything. And I saw a testimonial from a guy, Keith F. And I wanted to bring this up because I think it's an important topic that not enough people really talk about. And that is gaining muscle, but not sacrificing inches, like doing the quote unquote lean bulk. Can you explain that to somebody who's really their only experience is we're either losing weight, losing fat, or we're gaining weight, gaining fat, regardless of muscle?
Yeah, I mean in the old days, people thought you had to bulk or cut. Yeah, when bulking meant, to gain muscle, you just had to eat like a pig and get as many calories in as you can. And I think there's been a paradigm shift with that recently. A lot of research is showing now that just eating excess calories, you put on some muscle, but you put on a lot of fat too. And I think the smarter approach is, yes, you do need some kind of a caloric surplus to gain muscle. You need the energy for the raw materials of muscle to be made, but we don't need to take it to such an extreme. It's much healthier and much more sustainable if you just get into a slight surplus of around 300 calories and stay consistent with that while you're still doing your cardio, while you're still, being active and trying to get 10,000 steps a day or what have you. That's really the new line of thinking on bulking.
Yeah. And I think it's also a really cool thing to understand that, hey, you're not going to gain any inches, which we can confidently say, like, either means you're not gaining body fat at all, or maybe very, very minimal amounts compared to like truly like dirty bulking style fat gain. And being that I work with many ladies, they're like, listen, I'm working my ass off to get this fat off. I don't want it to come back. It really does open a door for like, okay, let's work on muscle. We know it's going to be muscle that weight is going to be. So are you happy with that? And then they're like, oh, actually, yeah. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
sorry, another thing to consider is when you're very new to training, you don't really need to adjust your diet much at all. You're going to build muscle just from the novelty of the weight training stimulus. So, I don't like to overwhelm people with too many things to track at first. If you're just starting to get into the weights, just eat what you've been normally eating. Try to bump up the protein a little bit so you give yourself an edge. But just the training alone is going to put on muscle.
yep, for sure. And I know you're probably going down this route, but I know a lot of people aren't familiar with the concept of like newbie gains. How would you explain that for somebody who just doesn't know much about strength training at this point?
Well, when you first start training, you're going to notice probably before you see a difference in the mirror, you're getting stronger. If you're doing the same exercises consistently week to week anyway, you make what's called neural gains. Your central nervous system starts to make adaptations. It recruits muscle more efficiently. It starts to learn the movements that you're giving it in the gym, and you start to see a strength increase from that. And then you get this within a couple of weeks' time, you'll see, muscle growing in areas that it wasn't there before, and that's really what newbie gains is.
Yeah, yeah, it's a beautiful time. Like I still haven't figured out what an exact time frame is because I've seen some people stretch that pretty far. But when you're able to build muscle and burn body fat at the same time, it's like that's the dream, isn't it?
Yeah, and that can go on for several months in the beginning anyway. Yeah, I remember when I started working out and I was adding, 5 pounds to my bench press every single workout. I actually thought for a few weeks there, like, this is easy. I don't understand why people think this is hard work. Why isn't everybody benching 500 pounds? I'll be up to that in another month at this rate. And of course, it trail off after a while.
Yep, that's when you kind of make the decision. You're like, listen, am I gonna like gun this and hurt myself, or am I just gonna accept what physiology has given me? And most of us pick the earlier, like we just go for it and basically get to a point where we hurt ourselves and figure it out eventually.
That's it.
Yep. Unless I will say this, there are some dudes, especially in their 40s, 50s, 60s, that will just keep going. Like they will just keep like the nagging pain and keep pushing it and get hurt over and over and over again. If somebody listening right now who is that person, or maybe it's their wife that's listening and they're like, all right, I'm going to play this for my husband right now. Like, what would you say to that person?
I was gonna say I can't wait till I'm one of those guys. Give me another 20 years. Yeah, I mean, what to say so that the person doesn't hurt themselves? I think you have to. It's so important to keep some real perspective on this stuff because I think we get sucked into what we see in movies and on social media. Everybody's so ripped and in incredible shape, and you don't realize that so many times you're looking at the exceptions and not the rule. You're looking at people who are genetically gifted or they're enhanced with, PEDs. I think all of our physique idols these days, unfortunately, they have an asterisk next to their name. You've got to try to think about realistic heroes and pattern yourself after, what is, natural and what is possible. So don't get caught up in thinking that, you've got to be like these guys and push yourself into injury in that pursuit. Think about it in terms of, the way I think the physique idols of going back a ways like the 40s and 50s look before there was drugs and any of this stuff. The Steve Reeveses and the Pudgy Stocktons. Look her up. She was a physique idol for women in the old the original Muscle Beach days. Those are the people who had natural physiques that we can realistically aspire to.
Yeah, that it's funny you bring that up because I was just looking at, I think it was Danny Matranga's post from today. He put up the Batman from like, I want to say it was like the 50s. And I was just like, okay, this is wild considering we have like Ben Affleck who's stacked out of his mind. And then we got Christian Bale who's ripped beyond belief. And it's like, okay, the standards have changed a little bit. We got to assume that there's a little bit of help there.
Yeah, there usually is. And even if there isn't, they're getting help as far as, the personal trainers and the personal chefs and the incentive of millions of dollars for when they make these movies. They've got to be in their best shape. So they have an edge that most of us don't have. And, more power to them. But you just got to think in terms about, you were working with what you've got and what is going to be realistic for you in your situation.
Yeah. And I love that topic of the realism of like what exactly we have going on. Cause I think if we were to pin it down to like one thing that throws people off, I think it's an expectation thing where it's like, this should be faster. I should be seeing better results by now. And it's because of situations usually like this with the Hollywood kind of getting in the way and messing with that. if somebody was going to start the journey, what would you say would be some good like key indicators of like, I should probably expect this in a month or 2 months or three?
I mean, if you're lifting weights, I think you should expect yourself to be able to add a rep every workout, every time you repeat an exercise, and go up 2.5 to 5 pounds, every couple of weeks. So you should be doing that. You should be monitoring progressive overload, keeping some kind of a training log, and making sure you're getting stronger. Because really, that's ultimately all you can control at the end of the day, or the thing you can control the best. Your genetics will determine how much muscle you gain or how quickly you lose fat, but you can always control getting stronger. That's very much within your grasp. And yeah, I mean, you should be seeing changes in the mirror, and the more metrics you keep, the easier it'll be to monitor your progress. If you're taking measurements of your waistline, or you're checking in on the scale. I know a lot of people find the scale intimidating, or they don't want to get near it, but it is a good way to gauge, where your body fat levels are at.
Yeah, for sure. Because if you have the measurements to go with it, like I know for my clients, I use the Navy method. Like, is it perfect? No, but it gets us like to understand what kind of weight are we adding or losing at this point. So you kind of know, am I on the right path? You don't have to really get bogged down by the specifics.
Yeah, I always say to people, you should feel better within days, you should look better within weeks, and you'll notice if you're really sticking with it and working hard, you'll notice significant life-altering results within, a month or two.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, if we're being honest, like if you just go by how your clothes fit and don't even go near the scale, that'll probably give you a really, really good idea. And then if you go to the doctor and get some blood work taken and things have improved, it's like that should be good enough for anybody to be like, okay, let's keep doing this thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, there was something I saw in your media, and I wanted to kind of go down the rabbit hole a little bit because as we speak right now, my back is a little bit tweaky because I've been experimenting with Jefferson curls. And I'm like, all right, I think they're out of my training menu officially at this point, but I'd like to talk a little bit about perfect form because Jefferson curls, for anybody who doesn't know, it's basically a really rounded back deadlift and experimenting with different ranges of motion and things like that. So, when it comes to perfect form on deadlift, on a squat, or anything like that, would you say there is a perfect form? Yes or no?
It's maybe. I mean, there's perfect form is individual. I think there are some things that everybody's going to have in common. You've got to have a certain stance and your certain biomechanics to lift safely, but there's going to be a little bit of individual variance. I always say, if we're talking about form tips, think in terms of good posture first. The most important thing that'll get you through 90% of the exercises out there are, think about retracting your neck, make sure your chin is down, make sure you're leading with your butt when you push your hips back and any kind of hinge or squatting movement. Keep a long spine. If you're pressing anything, think in terms of keeping your elbows at a 45-degree angle from your torso. Those are things that are sort of general across the board when you're lifting weights that'll keep you safe.
Yeah. And at least in my head, and this could be totally wrong, I think it's not so much of an alignment issue that's really the problem. It's an engagement thing where it's like if you move a certain way, certain muscles take over and they're able to handle more or less load. So it's like, do you want to lift with mostly your lower back muscles, like your erectors and your QL, or do you want the whole core contributing and getting your hamstring and butt to contribute as well? One's going to be stronger than the other.
Yeah, you're right.
Cool. I'll take that one as a feather in my cap. And then the other thing too, because I've made posts about this as well, is that for some reason people are told by certain professionals, or even they may just think this themselves, is that if I'm a beginner, body weight stuff should be fine. Like why not just start with calisthenics because it's no weight, right?
Yeah, I did a post about this the other day. I mean, body weight stuff is great if you can do it, but there's so many people that it's just not very practical. I mean, it's very hard for bigger people, overweight people to do a body weight squat properly. They're much better off if you just give them a dumbbell for a goblet squat. It gives them a counterbalance. It's easier to get sink into their hips deeper. A lot of people, obviously, if they're heavy, they can't do pull-ups at all. So there's just while body weight might seem really, really basic, when you get down to it, it's just not as easy and as accessible as just, grabbing some dumbbells and using a bench.
Yeah. And I noticed this too a lot with kids, like youth athletes. Their parents are really sketched out by the concept of using weights, where it's like, by just cutting, like when they're doing it in football or soccer, it's like I think it's something like 3 times their body weight. So it's like if they're a 100-pound kid, that's 300 pounds of force. Or we do like lateral lunges with a 20-pounder. What do you think is going to be worse on the joints?
Yeah, you're 100% right. They've studied this. They used to think that it was dangerous for kids to lift weights at all, so they shouldn't do it. And now they found that's not really true because of what you just said. When kids are, playing and they're jumping around and bounding and running up and down, they're actually exposing their joints to many, many times the force that you would get from just statically lifting weights. So it's perfectly healthy. Now, the reason you don't see more kids lifting weights, not because it's dangerous, is because generally they're just not mature at that young age to, really take on a weight training regimen, just in the same way that many adults are not enough mature yet.
That's very fair. That's very fair. That's why anytime like somebody will ask, like, can I bring my son or daughter to the training session? I'm like, as long as they're mature enough to not hurt themselves, because that's really the only barrier to entry when it comes to weights.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard enough to get somebody, 35 who's already been diagnosed with a, heart problem and, has every incentive in the world to weight train and be consistent with it. I can't imagine trying to force it on an 8-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that would be a little bit tough. And I think the other thing too is understanding like load management and doing it properly, because then you have the flip side of that where it's like you get Billy's dad, who was like a college football player that's trying to have him bench 400 pounds before he hits high school. And that's not good either. It's like a Spike from the Little Giants or something.
Oh, good reference, man.
Hey, I'm always good for a movie reference. If I don't make it out of the podcast with at least one, it's a fail on my part.
Hey, so
Um,
am I. Bat it back my way if you have to.
for sure, for sure. Now, when it comes to certain exercises, what are like your absolute favorites that you kind of you catch yourself putting into the rotation? Because I know I have like my preferences, and every trainer kind of does. I'm just curious what yours are.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think exercise selection is so personal and it changes. It evolves with you over time. 15 years ago, I was old school. I was all about squat, bench, deadlift, barbells. That's all you needed. Those are the most universal, most efficient movements. Just get good at those and, you'll be covered. And I feel completely differently about that now. Like I've had a lot of trouble with injuries that I blame in part on the barbell lifts, or at least they aggravate those injuries. So I've gotten away from that. I like really joint friendly stuff now. I like landmine presses for shoulders instead of strict overhead barbell presses. I like Bulgarian split squats, a lot of single leg training instead of barbell back squats. I like machine pressing instead of, bench pressing. So, yeah, I think you've got to find there's no good exercises, there's no bad exercises. It's whatever works for you. You've got to just experiment and find what you can get strong on, that you like doing, that you can do with good form and that doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I'm very much the same way where it's like, honestly, really kind of transitioning to single leg because my personal training philosophy is the fact that like we can get to a certain point with bilateral stuff, squats, deadlifts, and everything. But eventually we're going to hit that point where it's like something hurts and we just kind of can't get past there. Or if we do, we got to accept the fact that we're probably not doing great stuff to those joints that are being affected. So it's like, do we split it and go to one leg? And if so, can we do that? And then possibly even increase our capacity when we go back to bilateral. So single leg seems to have a lot more bang for the buck rather than just bilateral all the time.
Yeah, and single leg it's just more user friendly. I mean, I'm sure you and I have spent many an hour trying to coach people how to squat properly, with a barbell on their back. It can be really tedious, but a single leg, I mean, a split squat or a Bulgarian split squat, they're hard exercises, but they're a little easier to teach and easier to get the hang of.
For sure. I mean, as long as your foot's flat and your knees inside your big toe and pinky toe, everything else is kind of right. Like it's very much like sprinkles on top at that point.
That's it.
Yeah. And then also with the shoulder exercises, I love the fact that you mentioned ones that allow your scap to move freely rather than doing this down and back position, which honestly, at least in my experience, I've noticed tends to piss off the shoulders of the people I'm working with because it's just that humeral head just grinding in there. And for some people, it just doesn't feel great having their shoulders pinched back all the time.
Yeah, for people who don't know, a landmine press is a great alternative to any kind of bench or shoulder press. There's a couple of ways to do it, but I like to do it in a half kneeling position, sort of get down on one knee, and then ideally you have a landmine apparatus, but if not that, you can just wedge a barbell into the corner of your gym and you just hold the other end and you press it up like a lever. And the way the arc of the bar moves, it's on like a 45-degree angle. It's just a much nicer, friendlier shoulder movement than your conventional pressing.
Yeah, for sure. I know the first time using it, I'm like, ooh, this is smooth. This feels different. And then you start feeling it in different areas that should be working when you're doing a shoulder press, for example. Because a lot of people, when they press, they're shrugging it up. They're not necessarily letting that shoulder roll back. And then their lat kind of gets involved, which I think a lot of people don't get the benefit of.
Yes, and to your point a moment ago, we were touching on the moving of the scapula. Yeah, that involves the serratus anterior muscles, which you really don't work a lot, or you certainly don't work it in other pressing exercises very well because you've always got your shoulders pinned down and back. And when you get that serratus working, that really holds the shoulder together. And yeah, I hate to use the word functional because it's overused, but it's a very good functional, very athletic kind of shoulder pressing exercise.
Yeah, I do love the word functional because I will shit on it and use it all at the same time because it's so mobile in that way. And I think another thing too I wanted to bring up now that you mentioned that is how sometimes we can have like developed areas of our body and they're not necessarily strong. Or we see this a lot where some people are really tight in one spot and it's due to weakness, not like an overuse thing. Because I know when I did men's physique, my serratus was popping. And I'm like, oh, this must be really strong. Then you do a push up and you're shaking like crazy. And I'm like, okay, maybe not. So, do you notice that at all, like with any of the physique athletes or anything like that, that they have very developed areas, but they may not be that strong compared to other stuff?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because I worked at Men's Fitness and Muscle and Fitness magazines for many years, and I was the tech on those shoots, and we would get these guys who walked in absolutely phenomenal shape. They were ripped to shreds, and then we would ask. We always had real weights on those sets when they were demonstrating the exercises for the workouts in the magazines. We always used real weights, and you could see instantly that how poorly trained a lot of these guys were. They looked like $1 million, but they performed like 5 cents. You ask them to do a single leg squat, like we were saying before, they had no balance. When you asked them to do any kind of bent over row, they had sometimes we had like a 10 on each side of the bar, where meanwhile, they could bench 225 in a picture, no problem, but they couldn't barbell row like, more than a dime on each side. And yeah, I think that people are generally very weak in the all the muscles on the back compared to the front. They have no balance. They can't handle single leg stuff. So yeah, you don't. The lesson is just don't work the mirror muscles. Don't be focused solely on what you can see in the mirror in front of you. There's a whole lot of muscle behind you got to take care of too.
Yeah. And this is one of those things I noticed when I realized I am not going to be a good power lifter because it just wrecked me the whole time. But switched to single leg, and all my power lifter buddies that could squat 5, 6, 700 pounds couldn't single leg reverse lunge or Bulgarian split squat anywhere near what I could. I'm like, I'm going to beat them at this all the time because
Yeah,
I
and
think people
going
just assume that it's
right.
like you're good at it.
Going back to what you said before, you single leg and then going back to bilateral, you end up being stronger if you work on these weak points just for a few weeks, even if it's not your thing, if that's not the kind of training you enjoy, just giving a little time to it can pay dividends to the more conventional training that you do the rest of the time.
Yeah. And it kind of circles back to the whole youth athlete conversation because one of the biggest problems is athletes specializing too early. Like, and when you say too early, it's usually like before high school. So anything like when they're doing club sports in middle school or even earlier than that year round, it's kind of the same deal. They're playing the same sport. Powerlifters are playing the same sport. CrossFit athletes are relatively kind of close to the same sport. And they never experience anything else, which leads to issues.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but so for anybody listening right now, if you couldn't tell, your kids should be strength training and they should be cross training. Just we'll put that out there.
Yeah, I mean this is actually it's kind of a new concept here, but I know in the Soviet Union for years they were ahead of the game on that stuff. They never let athletes specialize too early. They always made sure that the wrestlers played basketball and the soccer players did gymnastics. They made sure the kids got a wide array of training in different areas so they could develop sort of all around athletic skills. And it's much better. It might seem counterintuitive, but it's much better than getting a kid to specialize too early, where they just develop motor patterns in too specific of a way.
Yeah. And I noticed too with training the kids that did that, they're really burnt out on the sport. So by the time it's like, all right, got that college scholarship, and some of them get to the point where like, I don't even want to play anymore, man. It's like, hey, I wouldn't either if that was like every single day for the past however many years. That'd be brutal.
Yeah, you're right. The mental break of just having different seasons in other sports is probably just as valuable as the physical part.
For sure. Because that, like, I know at least when I was younger, you'd kind of be hungry to get started. Like, you're like, okay, this season was just enough. I'm ready for the next one. Like, when football was done and then Thanksgiving hit, I'm like, it's basketball tryouts. Let's go.
You're right on.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, another one I had on here that I definitely wanted to get to is I know you're big on creating like written content, long form, nuanced stuff. And with that comes sometimes certain topics don't hit like we thought they would. Cause I know I've been guilty of that too. And I'm curious, as a writer, what's a piece of content that you poured a lot into and you're like, this is really good, but it didn't quite catch that like we could go into a little bit?
Oh man, that's like everything I've ever done. Yeah, I mean, I think that I have some ebooks available on my site right now, free for download. So you're not gonna cost anything to check them out. But I wrote this ebook recently on it's called the Transformation Templates, and it goes into all the aspects of program design, which I thought was, oh, this is giving away a ton of value. And I mean, there's been a response to it, but I'd say it's been kind of lukewarm compared to what I was expecting. And I think the lesson was it was too much. It just overwhelmed people. I think with a lot of long form content, unless the person is deeply interested in the subject matter, they're not really going to be able to hang in there for it. And you're better off with just shorter sound bites, which I can certainly understand the wisdom of. But I think anything with program design, it's funny how many people profess that they want to understand this stuff and they want to take their training into their own hands and do this workout and that workout. But when you try to lay out for them the rudimentary aspects of how to build the program, they glaze over.
Yeah, the more I get into the years of doing this, and I know you've been doing this for a long time too. I keep hearing stuff that like Michael Boyle and even his one of his former trainers, Ben Bruno, every time they say something and a concept will resurface. And like I know Ben Bruno, kind of how you were just saying, he's like, when somebody asks, what muscle does this work? Does it work this? And he just goes, yup. Like doesn't put anything behind it. Just, yep, that's it. You got it. And because that's what people want. They want to be like, am I doing this right? Am I right? Do I sound like I'm right? Yes. Okay, we're good.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what we were saying before, training it's a people business. It's about making people happy and empowering them and finding stuff they like to do. The actual science of it, the best possible science of it, I would say is comes in second, third, or fourth in importance.
For sure, for sure. Because at the end of the day, the beer test will probably be the biggest contributing factor to somebody's like long-term health when it comes to sticking with a trainer.
Yes, sir.
And for anybody who's new to this, maybe you came through Sean's media, the beer test. I don't know if you've talked about it, but basically, when you start with a personal trainer, ask yourself in the beginning, based on this person's personality, would I go grab a beer with them? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, you probably got somebody solid. Like they'll keep you showing up as opposed to somebody who you don't want to keep showing up for, regardless of how much they know.
Yeah, and you want to make sure this person genuinely cares about you. Are they interested in more than just your results and more than, if you showed up that day, and are you listening to everything they tell you to do? Is the person interested in you as a person? Are you hitting it off with them? Because nobody wants to work with somebody who's like not doesn't feel like a friend.
For sure. And I know this industry in particular is laden with people who like to work out and they get into personal training because they're like, I just get to work out all day. And then they find out that's not the case. It's like you're helping other people all day. And some people just don't quite get that yet. And you might get stuck with somebody like that, unfortunately. But it's good to know off at the jump, like, hey, I'm looking for this.
Yeah, and let's face it, a lot of coaches have a God complex too. They're in this because they want to give
No.
orders. Yeah, they like to give orders. They want to be the center of attention. They like people deferring to them and having the power to kind of control somebody's day or their life. And you got to watch it with that. A good coach realizes that they're the employee. They're the one who is taking orders from the client. So keep perspective.
Exactly. Because that's really what matters at the end of the day. I know I had a guy, Jesse, on the podcast, and he lost a ton of weight. And he gave a really good perspective. He's like, listen, I got my trainer for my strength training. I've got my nutritionist or dietitian. Like they don't counteract each other. They don't talk shit on each other. Like they are in their lane. And if you have somebody who's like that stays in their lane and just loves helping you, you're in a good place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I feel like 40 minutes of going down the stuff that I know would really help everybody else is great, but now I kind of want to ask the questions that I want to ask. So I know we were like kind of talking about the testosterone thing a little bit in the beginning, but I'm curious when it comes to the rabbit hole that is hormone replacement therapy, or maybe even using it for competitive reasons. Like, what have you been into lately as far as that discussion goes? Like, what's been the area of focus?
I'm not super up on that. I mean, I'm interested in hormone replacement therapy, as I continue to age and may find that I need it more. I haven't experimented with any of that yet. I think we are getting to the point where we're going to see anti-aging clinics on every street corner pretty soon. And I think everybody's going to be doing something to keep themselves, as vibrant as they can as they get older. And, I think that's great. I do think that there's going to be risks with it, health risks associated with it, and they haven't worked out all the kinks yet. There isn't enough science yet to really show that this is a good idea for the majority of people. But be it steroids, TRT, or Ozempic, or any other kind of medical hack, I don't think any of that will ever replace just good nutrition and consistent exercise, living a simple life, keeping your stress down. These things will never really be outmoded, no matter how many pills and drugs they crank out.
Yeah, for sure. Cause I think I was listening to Mike Israetel talk on this subject where they are coming out with medications that make it easier to build muscle, even if you do absolutely nothing. But what comes with that? Like, do you have the connective tissue to support the muscle? Like, are the tendons and ligaments growing at the same rate? Yes or no? Are you able to contract those muscles even though we're not using them? Like, it's this weird connectiveness neurologically that we may not have. So the coordination aspect is gone. So it's like, great, we've got this stuff, but if we don't tie it together by doing the basics, what are we really doing?
Yeah, I remember a few years ago there was excitement about myostatin drugs. Everybody's seen
That's
these
it.
pictures of the cattle that have this gene deficiency that allows them to grow muscle, to tremendous sizes. There's no governor on their muscle growth. And then, of course, scientists are trying to figure out how to hack that to give, people who want to build muscle the same kind of edge. I don't think they figured it out yet, but even if they did, if you're taking the governor off of one thing growing in your body, I'd be concerned about what else might grow uncontrolled. So, it kind of sounds like cancer to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of like steroid use, right? Like where it's like, okay, steroids will help build the muscles in the body, but guess what? What's one of those muscles? Your heart. Guess what happens when it gets too big? It doesn't work as well, and it could lead to a heart attack. So it's like when you see bodybuilders dying so young, it kind of makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, along with all the other stuff that they do too, like they're dipping their toes in insulin and all that stuff. Have,
Yeah, it gets
yeah,
gross when you get into the world of competitive physique athletics.
yes, for sure. And I think that's another reason why people like when you hear bodybuilder protocols or like protocols that models do or and stuff like that, you can pretty much just toss it aside because at the end of the day, those are extreme methods more likely than not, and they're not sustainable. They're just for that brief moment in time.
That's right. And, I had a friend who was a natural bodybuilder and coach to those guys, and his methods are very simple. He didn't get into diuretics the week of a show to drop more water weight. It was just counting calories, manipulating your carb intake, but very simple methods. So even guys at the elite level, if they're natural, they don't resort to all these little tricks. Like the basics still work very, very well, even for the people at the top 1%.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that was a big eye opener when I wish I could remember who said it, but they're like, look at all these famous bodybuilders back when they were like teenagers. You see Arnold, he looks like he's a 30-year-old dude that's been lifting his whole life at 17 when he won, what was it, Mr. Europe?
Yeah, Junior Mr. Europe, that's right.
Yeah, Junior Mr. Europe. And then you look at Ronnie Coleman doing powerlifting meets at 18, and you're like, that kid is 18.
Yeah, I remember I met Jay Cutler, Mr. Olympia, I think 4 times. I met him 20 odd years ago when I first got into the industry, and we were just having a casual conversation. Very friendly, not got nice guy. But I remember asking him, what do you remember about training when you got into it? And he's like, well, my very first day in the gym, I benched 315. Here I am, 20 years later, I still haven't benched 315. And he did it in his very first day. So obviously there are some people out there who are just, specimens, and they've been dealt a better hand than the rest of us, and there's nothing you can ever do to catch up with them.
Nope. And people refuse to believe that. I'm like, I think I was very fortunate. I went to a high school that actually did a program with a correctional facility nearby. So I got to see some guys that like were genetic freaks. Some of them rolled up with abs with no problem at all. Another guy had been doing nothing but push-ups for a little bit, and he benched 315 the first time we got him under the bar. I'm like, oh, these people do exist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not you or me, I guess, but I know they're out there.
Nope. I felt like a boss doing 135 the first day, and the seniors were like, wow, that's good. And then this guy rolls in. I'm like, all right, I'll just leave. But anywho, um, now when it comes to the professional bodybuilder side of things, I'm curious, is there anything else that you think a lot of people don't see or a lot of people don't understand? Because it is kind of this, I don't know, like, I don't know the right verbiage here, but it seems like this area that a lot of people have glamorized that doesn't necessarily, maybe it has some things that it hides. Are there certain things that you see other than like the drug use or the diuretics or anything that comes to mind like that?
Again, I just think the genetics of it, volume is an interesting discussion because it always gets split into two camps. There's some people who think you need to do just like a couple of sets for a muscle and you're good. And then there's the traditional bodybuilding thinking, which is you got to, bomb yourself with set after set, do what Arnold did, which is 20 to 30 sets for a single muscle group in a week. And I think the truth is that what the science is pointing to now is we can probably all handle more volume than we thought we could, that the alarmists would have told us that we could. You're probably not as likely to overtrain as you might think. So it's not a bad idea to push it to 10 or more sets for a muscle group in a week. But you don't have to. If people listening to this podcast, if they're over 40, if they're, moms and dads, they don't want to put that kind of time and energy in the gym, but they still want to build muscle and, be ripped to some degree. Yeah, I think 2 to 3 sets per exercise, totaling around 10 sets per week for the muscle group is perfectly fine for most people. They will absolutely grow on that no matter what age they are. And I think as you get older, you've got to learn to scale back a little bit because your recovery isn't what it was. But you don't limit yourself either. If you really want to, if you want to be that older guy or gal who's really muscular and just blows everybody away, you can probably handle more training than you're doing right now.
Yeah, maybe not the Branch Warren leg day with 50 sets, but I have done that, people. It's not fun. But yeah, these magazine workouts sometimes are not necessarily what they are actually doing, correct?
You're right, absolutely. A lot of times these guys, I think they want to sell themselves hard. They want to make it seem like they're doing these, incredible Spartan-esque workouts that nobody could hang with them on. There's a lot of mythology around it, like, oh, all these sets, all these different exercises, but the reality is they train a lot simpler than they seem. So there's so much smoke and mirrors in fitness. So much of it is about, building a mystique and a legend that gets followers and gets people to believe. And I think people want that aspirational quality in there. So yeah, just remember at the end of the day, it comes down to just a couple of exercises, a couple of healthy habits, a couple of the same foods, and just doing it day after day after day.
Absolutely. And I also like how you mentioned that, like, if we were to bring the volume way, way down, it would still work. And I think that's a missing piece of a lot of the stuff that we see out there on social media, in all forms of media, actually, where it's like we get so hyped up about these things that are the best this, the best that. And at the end of the day, everything pretty much works that we see people using. And I know I learned this the hard way with kettlebells when I was a young trainer. I'm like, there's no way this is going to put on any muscle, and then people would hop on an in body and be significantly more lean muscle mass. And I'm like, damn, okay, I was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the best again is individual. I know that sounds like a kind of a cop-out answer, but kettlebells for one guy and dumbbells for another guy, and high volume for one dude, low volume for another, high protein, lower protein. You've got to experiment a little bit and figure this out for yourself.
Yeah, I know. I definitely know Arnold said this at one point. He's like, everybody had different programs that worked better for them. And that is a very true thing. A lot of us need to experiment a little bit sometimes and see what works best. And it might not be necessarily the thing that is technically the biological, physiological best thing for us. It might be the thing we find the most enjoyment of and do more of easier.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I think that's what most people end up doing anyway. It's like, oh, it's something I truly, truly enjoy. And now I'm going to tell everybody this is the way.
Yeah, again, it's not necessarily the best program might not work for you if you're not digging it. If you don't want to go back and give it your all the next time that day rolls around, then that's not the right program for you.
Exactly. So if you got somebody telling you best thing ever and you're trying to force feed it, better off just trying something else and just seeing, oh, am I actually enjoying this at all? And then just figure out the workouts or the exercises that you genuinely truly enjoy, because you only need a handful of different versions if you have joint issues, because at the end of the day, it's kind of the same movements.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, we covered a lot of good stuff in this. Like, I was very, very excited to go down these rabbit holes with you, and I'm glad that we gave the people a lot of really good information. And I definitely want to send them your way with the website so they can actually get their hands on that stuff if they want to nerd out a little bit and get that depth of knowledge. So, where would you, along with those, where else would they go to find more of your stuff?
I'm on all the socials, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, at Sean Hyson, just my name. And if you want to check me out online, my website is fitnessdistilled.com, or if that's too hard to type out, it's just my name, seanhyson.com. I've got a newsletter where I give away exclusive content every week. Sign up.
Awesome. Awesome. Definitely take advantage of that, guys. And as a thank you to Sean for coming on, go ahead, and if at any point you heard something in this podcast where you're like, that hit really good, or you heard something and you're like, this person in my life needs to hear this, go and share it with them. They'll appreciate it, and so will we. And thank you for making it all the way through. But until next time, I'll see you guys later. Go kick some ass. Bye-bye.